Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar where we're going to be looking at some strategies and approaches to help you to increase your business's protections against cyber attack. My name is Mark Lee. I'm the MD of the Managed IT and Cloud Services division at GCI, which includes our cybersecurity practice. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Jeremy Hendy. Jeremy is the CEO of Scurio, who are one of our partners whose technology we're leveraging to increase the levels of protection that we can provide to our customers through our award-winning managed security services. We've got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to press on, but just a quick reminder that you can submit any questions you've got via the chat window in the interface, and if time permits, we'll try to answer your questions at the end of the session, or if not, we'll come back to you directly with some updates. Thanks, Jeremy. Next slide. So, excuse the tired old quote, but I think it is as relevant as it's ever been. So Robert Mueller, who's much more famous now than he was back in 2012 when he made this statement. You'll know him from all the spats he had with the outgoing president of the US. But what he said back in 2012, well, it was true then, and if it was true, then it most certainly is now. Because cybercrime has grown exponentially over the last several years, and through 2020, this trend has undoubtedly continued. The threats and risks posed by cybercriminals to all of us in both our personal and business lives really are real. Thanks, Jeremy. And the risks that he pointed out 8 years ago, well, you can see them only too clearly today through these data points from the likes of the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre here in the UK, NISA in Europe, if we can still talk about those at the moment, and through our own experiences here at GCI. So just a few data points. So in not quite 12 months, between September last year and August this year, there were actually 2.3 million malicious emails, most of those phishing emails flagged to the NCSC by the UK public. And also almost 167,000 phishing URLs taken down. We'll talk more about those two things in a minute. And from a European perspective, the whole COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a lot about this sort of thing in the press. There's been a huge uptick in phishing attacks, masquerading under information and surveys and all sorts of things around COVID-19, people just clicking on it quite innocently, looking to get some more information. And the net effect of all of those sorts of things has been massive fraud and financial impact to businesses, estimated at 26 billion euros last year through business email compromise attacks, often which began with phishing. From our own perspective, and we've talked a lot about this year, we've been running audits of organizations' Office 365 instances, and what we found across that, we've done an awful lot of those now this year, is that about 68% of all Office 365 instances show signs of compromise. That's where people's mailboxes have been accessed, data stolen, or forwarding rules and things like that set up. And despite all of that stuff, something that's really interesting is that actually less than 10% of all cyber attacks globally make use of a system weakness. The vast majority of it are down to a simple thing, that people make mistakes and people are duped by criminals. And that's really the essence of what we're going to talk about today. Thanks, Jeremy. Anyone that's caught any of our previous webinars, and we've done a lot of these sorts of sessions through this year, will know that we've talked a lot about perimeter security measures, email system hardening, web filtering, and 24/7 security monitoring with technologies like SIEM, endpoint protections, intrusion prevention and detection. And these all play a really vital part in building a multi-layered, holistic approach to cyber defense. But today we're going to look at something a little bit different, which starts from the premise, almost Robert Mueller's premise, that no matter how hard you try and whatever protections you put in place, the cyber criminals will continue to look for ways through and around your measures. And as I said a minute ago, remember, only 10% of attacks really exploit system weakness anyway, and most usually involve some kind of identity theft. So today we're going to talk about 2 ways we can help to make some inroads into the 90% of cases which are not about system weakness, but usually about people. Thanks, Jeremy. So many attacks start with something like this. It's a mock-up of a DocuSign email. It's asking the recipient to follow a link to review a document and sign it. And when users click, they're sent to a bogus site, because whilst this may look real, and the criminals have tried quite hard to make it look real, to research the recipient using lots of different techniques. So when it lands in the inbox, it's very common for people to just click on it innocently, thinking they're doing the right thing. And it's a very simple scam, but it's also really hard to detect. And once the criminals have stolen the user's credentials, the next port of call is very often your email system, and that's very often Office 365. Thanks, Jeremy. So one of the things we've been doing at GCI all year, leveraging some AI technology that we developed, is to frequently search our customers' Office 365 logs to look for indications of compromise. It's a simple, pragmatic thing to do. It's not stopping anybody getting in, because if they're there, they already have got in, but it's giving you an early warning and alert so that you can start to do something about it. Now, you can do this yourself. If you've got the time and the resource, you can check your logs. We recommend that you do it regularly. We try to do it monthly for both ourselves and our customers as well. It's simple, it's pragmatic, and it's a really good way to begin to increase your protections. Thanks, Jeremy. The other thing we're going to talk about today, I'm going to hand over to Jeremy in a minute to tell you a lot more about this great technology that we've introduced into our services. And that's something called dark web monitoring, and it uses Scurio's technology. So this, again, back to that premise that it's about credential theft, where many attacks begin. This is technology which looks outside of your organization. It's not protecting your perimeter. It's looking into the dark web, the near web, the internet, looking for credentials of your business or you personally that might already have been stolen. And we've integrated this technology into our 24/7 SOC services so that we can pick up these alarms from the Scurio technology platform the minute they're spotted, and then we can begin to work with our customers to remediate the risk. And I'm going to hand over to Jeremy, who's going to take you through how it works.
Thanks very much, Mark. That's great. So yeah, as Mark explained, we're the technology provider behind this dark web monitoring and this digital risk protection solution. So I'm going to talk a bit about how that works and how we're partnering with GCI to help protect their customers. So I think a couple of things to start with. Your data, your organization's data, is already outside the perimeter of your organization. Everyone's going through digital transformation. They've got very complex real-time systems where data is shared with dozens or hundreds of partners. And of course, that's been accelerated by COVID when everything has gone online, which is great for the customer, but it means your data is being shared and processed in lots of different places. Obviously, the rise of cloud is a big mega trend. We talk to a lot of organizations that say, well, we don't use cloud. And then you ask them if they use Office 365. And they say, oh, yeah, well, we use Office 365. So the fact is, that data is already out there. And perhaps the worst is the so-called shadow IT. So those are those systems that are usually cloud-based, where your staff are logging into them usually to help them do their job, but you don't necessarily know about them. They haven't told the IT security team they found this really cool new data enrichment service that helps with the marketing email communications, and all the customer data is flowing through it. And of course, one of the problems with clouds is they leak, and all it takes is one of those systems to be compromised, and your customer data, your staff logins, can leak out. So that data is already outside the perimeter, and the perimeter has just got a whole lot bigger. We don't have one building to maintain anymore. We've got 1,000 individual houses as lots of office workers are working from home, which is going to continue into next year, and likely to be a sort of semi-permanent trend for a lot of staff. And those devices, of course, are in an uncontrolled network environment on Wi-Fi with uncertain security. There's Internet of Things devices on the same network. There's uncontrolled physical access to the machines. And even the simple things, as Mark was saying, it's about people, mistakes made by people. It's much harder for me to just talk across the office to my finance director to say, hey, Ben, did you really send me that email asking me to sign this off? So impersonation, fraud, business email compromise are causing, loss of a lot of money. And that was a really interesting stat, Mark, you said about, was it 26 billion of losses across Europe. The whole of the cyber insurance market worldwide is only less than $5 billion at the moment. So already the problem there is, many times the amount that can be protected through insurance. And unfortunately, another downside of COVID is there's going to be more malicious insider activity. People are suffering economic stress, mental stress. They maybe had their salary cut or their job cut, and if they want to do some damage to you or steal some data, it's much easier for them to do that in this environment. So defending the perimeter is great, but it's no longer enough. And a lot of cybersecurity is quite rightly focused on defending the perimeter that you can control. And what we're doing with digital risk protection is complementing that with a data-centric layer that is giving you some advanced warning to threats to your infrastructure or leaks of data through your supply chain. So if we compare, the traditional cybersecurity approaches that can monitor your perimeter, they tend to be focused on your endpoints, your networks, your traffic, your firewalls, looking for those malicious IP addresses, those bad IPs on the internet, the malware signatures, and so pretty much falls in the wheelhouse of the IT security team. With digital risk protection, what we're doing is adding a layer here that is looking outside your perimeter, and so it's fundamentally a data-centric approach to looking out for information that can be a threat to you. Monitoring the surface, deep and dark web for information that's specific to you. And so really this is something that broadens the scope beyond the IT security team, who are busy and overstretched trying to defend the perimeter, to the people that are owning the data, they're putting it in those cloud platforms and are ultimately responsible for risk and compliance. So when we think about how networks are organized, all the way from those well-defended corporate systems on the left through to all of the third-party internet sites that your staff use all day, every day, we can sort of divide those into a couple of categories. There's the systems you know about, your in-house corporate systems, the cloud apps that you officially sanction, like Office 365 and Salesforce and Dynamics, and some of the systems that your partners use. But there's a lot of systems your staff are using where you really have no visibility, particularly when they're working from home. What systems are they actually accessing? And even those ones you know about, you don't directly control the security of them. If it's a private cloud where you're configuring the security and managing it yourself, that's great. But a lot of times you don't have a lot of choice. You're reliant on that cloud provider to keep your data safe. So really, you've got systems that are managed. There are systems you know about where you can audit their security, but really that's often just a questionnaire or checking their ISO 27001 certificate. And there's a lot more out there that are unknown and unmanaged. And risks often come from those sites. A third-party site will get hacked where the members of staff password can then be used to get back into their email system. So the threats to your known and managed systems often originate from what's going on outside the firewall. And part of the problem is you've probably got 20 or 30 core systems inside your organization, but you might have several hundred or thousands of these shadow IT partner systems that your staff are logging into. And there was a lot about bring your own device a few years ago, which has, I think, largely been secured. But we're seeing a bit of a trend in the shadow IT of almost bring your own app. Someone will join a company. They say, hey, I was using this really great system in my last place to do this really funky workflow automation around email marketing. Let's start using it. And they don't ask anybody. They don't tell anybody. But it's worse than this. Each of those partners, each of those cloud services has their own pyramid of risks. So you end up having to worry about fourth party risks. And, the reality is you've kind of got something that's more like a house of cards, and it's more likely that you'll lose data outside your organization than the leak will originate from inside the organization. So what we're doing with DRP, digital risk protection, dark web monitoring, is having a platform that can detect in real time that data, those credentials being posted online. They can generate a real-time alert to help you or the service provider take action, and through a partner like GCI, analyze and address the cause so it doesn't happen again. So the digital risk protection platform is protecting you from two types of breach. Of course, the bad guys are after you, whether it's a hacker or a malicious insider, but as Mark said, 90% of hacks happen through simple human error. Because we're not connecting to the network in any way, you can cover data that's stored anywhere, whether it's inside your network, in your supply chain, or in those shadow IT systems or your staff laptops. And then it's about these kinds of data. So really, we think of the kind of data you can protect as the login credentials, which are the keys to the castle, threats to your assets and infrastructure, data about your customers and your staff, and finally, any kind of business critical information. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some examples of each of those use cases. But what we're fundamentally doing with the platform is we're turning each of those kind of data sets into a set of search terms, which can be static or dynamic, that will represent that data. How would we detect that data if it leaks outside? And the simplest possible one is your corporate email domain. So the only search term I need to look for compromised Scurio credentials is scurio.com as a search term. But if I've got 30,000 customer records in my Salesforce system, I would need to be monitoring 30,000 search terms there. If I've got 53 different servers out there, I want to be monitoring the names and IP addresses of those servers. All my staff, I might want to monitor their home email addresses. So, broad set of search terms, but every single threat to your business can be thought of as represented by a search term. And what we're doing is we're putting those into the DRP platform, which is continuously and automatically monitoring the surface, deep and dark web 24 hours a day, and issuing a real-time alert or an API integration through into a remediation platform like ServiceNow, which is used by GCI to then raise a ticket, investigate the issue and resolve it for you, hopefully before you've woken up in the morning. So that's the fundamentals of how that platform's working, is searching for your data on the bad bits of the internet and alerting in real time and helping you fix the problem. So let's look at a few of these examples. So login credentials, obviously to your email system, those cloud apps, even your customer login credentials. This is an example. All the data in this presentation has been anonymized, by the way. These are real case studies, but all the data is fictional. But this is a really common example. We see thousands and thousands of these all day, every day, where you've got a dump of an email address and a plain text password on lots of different sites, dark websites, forums, paste and bin sites that are used by hackers and criminals to exchange data. So this particular example triggered an automated alert on our platform because it contained one of the email addresses in this post was from one of our customers, and it exposed their corporate email address, which was highlighted here, and the plain text password, which was Liverpool, probably the name of his football team, I guess. And we see, again, when you look at the kind of passwords that get exposed, so many of them are the names of football teams, wives, kids, dogs. People are not they're not using unique, strong passwords for all these systems. So we've detected that in real time. What do we now do? Well, immediately take steps to reduce the probability of a compromise and impact the risk. So obviously the risks to that being exposed are business email compromise. If that same password or a variation of it can be used to get into the Office 365 or his home email, then you've got a significant risk of business email compromise and fraud. That same password or a variant might be used to get into the network or the VPN or to launch spear phishing attacks. So simple things that can be done by the incident response team. We can request that post gets taken down. Depending on the site it's appeared on, that can be actioned within an hour, and that will limit the amount of time that password and email combination is propagating, but it's still out there. So depending on the user's role, immediately triggering a password reset on the Office 365 system or on the corporate VPN may be a precaution, particularly if it's a privileged account user or somebody that works in finance. Informing that end user, so saying, hey Marcus, your password's been exposed on a dump site, here's a redacted version of it, strongly suggest they go and reset that on any third-party sites, and then educate the user, phishing awareness course, good password hygiene, make sure they're using the password manager. So some very simple steps that can be taken once you've detected that data being leaked. But if you're not detecting it in the first place, Marcus is merrily carrying on using Liverpool 6 ! As his password because he keeps being forced to change it. Another real example, this is an investment fund manager, manages a fund in the city, hundreds of millions of pounds, and his email address and a plain text password is exposed. It's the name of his kids. And what's happened here is one of the sites he's used this on has got hacked, and those credentials have been leaked in a combo list. Another hacker has then used automated tools using this, something called credential stuffing scripts, commonly circulating, where you can put in hundreds of millions of email addresses, point them at a service like Netflix or Amazon or PayPal, and see how many of them work. And if 0.1% of them work, that's great. You've got a few thousand you can sell. And so here what's happened is someone's found that he used the same password on his Netflix account, has sold it to somebody, and in the process of delivering the data to them, they put it on an anonymous pasting site, but it's one that's unprotected. We've detected it, alerted in real time, and can then inform that end user and get them to go and change their password everywhere. And so really, things like single sign-on and MFA and for privileged account users, identity access management are really core to your security, but they can be resource intensive to implement, and they don't help protect those unknown and unmanaged systems. So often you can be reliant on the individual employee to be doing the right thing. Are they generating a unique password in their browser? Are they saving it in their browser, or are they just using the name of their football team? It's, if you're reliant on people, that's the weak link. So, some of the things you can really do to make it easy to mitigate that risk is to just, as part of the security culture, roll out a corporate password manager. It's very low cost. You can give them to your employees. We'd recommend giving one they can use at home as well, so they get into the habit of generating a unique password that they don't know and they don't remember, because that's the most secure type. And then also educating them to perhaps not use their work email address on completely unrelated sites, which are probably more likely to be insecure and get hacked. So that's the credentials. We'll come back to that when we talk about customer data, but let's take another look at kind of other kinds of attacks and monitors you find on the dark web. So people talking about your servers and your infrastructure on your apps on hacker forums and dark websites is another really easy thing to monitor using GCI's service. So here's a typical example, a post on the right that's flagged up. It's actually a hospital in this case. And what's happening is that organization is being targeted by hacktivist groups, part of the Anonymous collective, and they will often target multiple organizations like banks or hospitals or a particular country, and they're motivated by ideological, so they may not even be targeting your specific organization. You may just be caught in their trap. And what they're doing is they're running a penetration test on your organization. They've got pretty sophisticated scripts to identify any weaknesses or flaws in your infrastructure. In this case, I can see their script has said, oh, I've got no X-frame options on my website, so I can clone your website and clickjack it. What the bad guys will do is they'll typically be one or two people in that hacktivist organization that run these scripts, but they'll then publish the results on forums and sites to encourage DDoS attacks by their followers, and that's where we can detect it. So you can detect it in real time and block the attack. So automatically detecting mentions of any IP addresses or domains, giving you an early warning that they're targeting you with an operation, and letting you deploy countermeasures like increasing the web application firewall strength to try and survive a DDoS attack. The other really common type of infrastructure attack is typo squatting. So this is registering a domain name that's very similar to my own with the hope of getting people to inadvertently sign up to it through a phishing email or just by mistyping in the browser. And because you can now put international characters in domain names, it gets really hard to spot the fake. Particularly on a mobile browser, it's very hard to tell the difference between what's the genuine URL and what's the fake one. And in this case, that's actually not a U. It's a different. It's a mathematical symbol that's been used here in the domain name, but almost impossible when I see that in an email to detect that that's not the real website. And what the bad actors will do, particularly if you've got something like that clickjacking vulnerability in there, is if this is my genuine site with an e-commerce login, they'll set up a fake site using a typo squatted domain, and anybody that logs into that fake site in response to a phishing email, the hackers have already got your login credentials in plain text. The more sophisticated ones will actually redirect you to the real sites. So you think, oh, that's a bit weird. I had to log into Microsoft twice there. That's funny. Oh, well, I must have got the password wrong. You often don't even realize it's happened. But now the hacker can not only get into my site, but also can use those automated scripts to try and target a bunch of other sites using the same email and password combination. So, looking out for those typo squatting domains is another really useful thing you can do to protect your organization against phishing and fraud. Next up, let's look at customer data. So, this is what hits the headlines. This is what gets a big fine from the ICO, is when you lose data about your customers or your staff. And,
Jeremy, if you can hear me, you've lost audio, unfortunately.
Showing up in this data dump. Where did this data come from? How do we think it leaked out? And more importantly, how would I know if this was my customer data? The original dump here had 2,136 email addresses in from 500 domains. We could tell it was all in the UK. There were lots of domains like hotmail.co.uk, lots of corporate.co.uk's, BT Internet, those kind of sites. But then when we looked in the dump, we also saw there were a lot of really interesting and unusual passwords being used. So this was just literally a subset of that data, and immediately we could see, okay, MaxPod Coffee, that's a very strange password to choose for two people to choose. And reminder, this is fictionalized data. The company isn't really called MaxPod Coffee, but it's a coffee company. So we thought that's a bit odd. We ran password analysis of those 2,136 posts and found that 10% of the passwords in there related to coffee, and 200 of them almost related to this company, MaxPod Coffee. So clearly something related to data from this site. And it doesn't take a very sophisticated intelligence analyst to run a Google search, and we found this coffee company who's the sole UK importer of this system we're calling MaxPod, which is a US coffee pod system, a bit like Nespresso, that kind of thing, used in a lot of small businesses, hotels, that kind of thing. So it was pretty easy for us to say, okay, this data probably came from this company. And we looked at their e-commerce site, and it was a very simple site that had been built using a very standard e-commerce framework, Magento. And the other thing that gave us some interesting clues was when we looked at the data, we saw that data set of 2,136 emails had several duplicate usernames and passwords in it. So it probably didn't come directly from the login database because you wouldn't get duplicates. We also saw typos in the domain names. We saw people trying, they couldn't remember which email address they'd used. And we saw typos in the password. So this data was probably not being exfiltrated from the company's systems inside their web server. It was probably being captured and skimmed off at the point of login. And it's this really common vulnerability over the past few years called Magicart, which is exactly what British Airways fell victim to a couple of years ago. And they've just had a pretty substantial fine from the ICO as a result. So, the way a typical e-commerce site works is you've got an HTML site with lots of JavaScript libraries. You've got a form you fill in and a button that says, right, I'm going to agree and pay now. And within that website, there's a bit of JavaScript that is waiting for you to press that button. And when you press it, it takes that data, encrypts it over SSL, and sends it to BritishAirways.com or the coffee company in this case. But what the hackers can do, and exactly what they did in the British Airways case, was they managed to corrupt one of these libraries and replace it with a different version that includes this malicious event listener, which was 20 lines of JavaScript that was also listening for this particular button to be pressed. And as soon as you pressed it, not only did it send your details to British Airways, but the website parceled it up and sent it over SSL to this typo squatted site they'd registered called BAways. So even if British Airways had spotted this library being corrupted, the guys reviewing it might have seen that this, okay, it's probably one of our sites. I'm not quite sure what it is, but move on. And the key thing here is this traffic, this data is being leaked out directly from the user's web browser, from their phone or from their home internet. It's not going through British Airways network. So British Airways can't detect that the data is being posted here. The only thing they can detect is that domain being registered and that one of their libraries has got changed and they don't necessarily know why. So part of the challenge when you've got that data being siphoned off is, how would I detect this data? If imagine this is British Airways data set, and if they've got 100 million records, how are they going to detect that all of those 2,136 customers are also part of their customer data set? So that's where large-scale customer data monitoring comes in. If none of those people are your customers, you don't care. If only one or two of them happen to be your customers, it's probably not an issue. But if 90% of the emails in that leaked post are also part of your customer data set, you probably want to take a look. And if it's 100% subset, you definitely want to take a look. So, the steps you can take to mitigate the loss, reduce the risk there, are monitoring for those typo-squatted domain names being registered. They often get registered days, weeks, months before an attack is launched. And so not only do you have to detect the registration, but you also want to monitor for the bad guys suddenly putting up a fake website or adding a mail server that they can use for phishing attacks or changing the DNS records. So detecting when the first registration happens, but also continuous monitoring for any changes. There's something I haven't talked about today, but it's called breach markers that are synthetic data markers you can put into your customer data sets that are unique to automatically monitor and alert if you get data being leaked or misused. Or you can take that entire customer data set you've got and take a secure anonymous fingerprint of it and monitor that, even if it's tens of millions of records. And again, that's a service we can offer through our partners like GCI, if that's relevant to your business. So finally, just before I hand back to Mark, we'll talk a little bit about some of the other categories of business critical information. So fake goods, intellectual property, trade secrets, whatever you wouldn't want to see leaked outside your business. Again, those are things you can monitor and alert you in real time if you see data being exposed that you didn't want to see exposed. So first example here is a leaked email thread from a law firm in Canada, again, anonymized. We've changed all the data, but most of the words in here are real. The story is a real one. So this has been dumped on an anonymous dump site. It's an email conversation between a couple of partners at a Canadian law firm and a client talking about some legal action that's undergoing at the moment. It's disclosing PII, both of the employees and these customers, and potentially commercially sensitive, legally sensitive information. We don't know, did that leak originate from the law firm? Did it originate from the client? By detecting it in real time, you can mitigate the damage. So immediately request takedown of that post to minimize the number of people that get to read this conversation. You can then go and investigate the network logs. Did somebody in the law firm post this data out to this dump site? Was it an internal leak? Was it a whistleblower who was leaking that information? And if you're a law firm, you might even want to make a legal request to this dump site to get the log data back from them to find the IP address of the person that leaked the data. And we've seen law enforcement do that successfully in the past. Another example would be counterfeit products being sold on dark web marketplaces. So if you have got products that are likely to be either sold as fakes or grey market goods where somebody in your supply chain is reselling them, you can take some action. You can often get that post taken down. You can investigate the vendor. You can investigate the supply chain fraud. You can even take legal action if you want to do that. So that digital risk protection extends beyond the credentials to pretty much any type of data you wouldn't want to see exposed. So we've talked about all those kinds of data, the fact you can protect it no matter where it's stored. This approach can defend you not just against those malicious attacks from bad guys and insiders, but also from simple human error. And through that platform that can do real-time detection and alerting, working with partners like GCI to help take action and address the root cause, you've got a solution that can protect your data no matter where it lives. So digital transformation, it's driven a step change in the way we all run our businesses, with data being increasingly outside the perimeter. Just defending the perimeter isn't enough anymore. The automated solutions like the Scurio platform can really help you reduce the risk to your business by detecting in real time, starting with those basics of Office 365. Leaked passwords is a really straightforward thing to do. And GCI's automated monitoring and the fact that through our API feeds, we're instantly raising a ticket and getting it looked at is a really good solution to minimize the impact to your business of that data being leaked. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I thought it was really fascinating. It's incredible technology that's made a big difference to the sorts of protections we're offering our customers. And I think just one thing which really spoke loud to me out of all of that is that the methods that these guys use is often to insert some kind of something on the inside of your organization, and to sit and do nothing for quite some time. They'll sit and watch and wait for their moment. So having this kind of outward view of your data, your credentials being out in the dark web before you've been attacked is just so vital, because they will often not immediately take the credentials and attack you. So there is time to do something about it in very many cases. But you don't know what you don't know, and this technology is helping to switch the light on really and show you into the spaces your information that's already out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, a lot of people kind of think of the dark web as a scary place. And, you'll notice we haven't used lots of images of scary hackers in hoodies or guns and drugs on dark web marketplaces, because, the dark web's just like the internet. Cyber criminals are internet businesses these days. And, it's not particularly scary. It's just that most people aren't looking there. And so, by illuminating those shadier parts of the internet, you can help just deal with the risk in the same way you would with other risks of your business. So it doesn't have to be scary. You just need to be looking out the window, and most companies aren't doing that.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Just a couple of closing points before we wrap up today's session. The first thing to say is that, as I said right at the beginning, dark web monitoring and the Scurio technology is one part of really a multi-layered approach to cybersecurity and protecting your business that we provide as a business, and that I'm sure you're taking steps, and today's presentation, if nothing else, I think has shown us some of the things that we can all be caught out by. So whether it's protections around your business with perimeter protections, things like web filtering and email monitoring systems and all those sorts of things, they're all vital parts of the jigsaw. But sometimes, despite all of our best efforts, the bad guys can get through. There can be an incident. And another feature of our services from GCI is incident response. And Jeremy mentioned how their technology feeds into that, and we make use of their technology not only in prevention, but also in the cleanup of an attack after the fact, helping people with ICO reporting and those sorts of things. The other vital part of the jigsaw, and we talked a lot today about people, and people being the weakest link, the old Anne Robinson expression. A key thing really, and I think you did touch on it, Jeremy, is training your people in the risks that are out there. So it's not just a technology response, it's people really, and them understanding what to look out for and what to avoid. Things like not using the same passwords in your personal life that you do in your business life. You can tell people that, but you really need, I think, to invest in the time to show them the sorts of material we've shared with you today. And indeed, we run repeat phishing training sessions through web portals and in workshops as well for lots of our customers. And if that's of interest, please do reach out. Final point from me, I mentioned Office 365 health checks earlier in the presentation. That's a service we also are offering complimentary actually at the moment. So if anybody's interested, there's a URL at the bottom of the screen. We can check your logs using our AI technology to as another way of identifying if anybody's already attacked you and had some success. I'm going to wrap up by just apologizing for the loss of audio that happened part of the way through the presentation, but I guess If you're in any doubt, you know that this was a live session and we're bringing you real live information in an interactive way. The slides from today's session will be published and you'll be able to access those later. If there are any further questions anybody wants to raise, we've been getting them coming in, by the way, and Jeremy's been dealing with them as part of the presentation. So slick work there, Jeremy. Anything else anybody wants to know more about the dark web services or anything else that we've talked about today, please do get in touch. But on that note, Jeremy, unless there's anything you wanted to add?
No, thanks, Mark. I think that's a really good wrap up, and I definitely encourage everybody, take advantage of that free Office 365 health check, because, as Mark said, was it 68% of the installations you've looked at have had some compromise? I think that's quite a sobering thought.
Well, absolutely. There's been it has been a real eye opener. We started doing those tests, I think, in about May. We've done more than 100 of them now, and 68% of them showed compromise. In some cases, nothing overly concerning, but in other cases, they were the starts of some fairly significant uncovering of fairly significant breaches and attacks, which we've helped organisations to clean up and deal with. So on that note, thanks everybody for joining us today. We wish you all a happier 2021 than I'm sure you all had 2020, and a good Christmas season, which is coming over the horizon soon. Thanks, Jeremy, for a great presentation today. I've really enjoyed it, really informative. And on that note, we'll draw the session to a close. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.